Welcome to the Commander breakdown of Arcades. I hope you're excited to get some walls into the red zone. But before we jump into the video, this is brought to you by MTGOtraders.com. They have you covered for all of your wall building needs. So let's take a closer look at Arcades. We have Arcades. It's going to be one colorless mana, green, white, and a blue, flying and vigilance. Whenever a creature with Defender enters the battlefield under control, draw a card. Then each creature you control with Defender assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power and can attack as though it did not have Defender. Right off the bat, one of the things you're going to get rewarded for in Arcades is running a lot of cards with Defender. That's pretty much going to be a given. Now, what is one of the ways that we can really kind of amplify the value that we're going to get from Arcades? That's going to be running stuff that cares about kind of abusing enter the battlefield effects. Stuff like Panharmonicon and Aura Shards. That's going to work really well with Arcades because Arcades doesn't care about when you cast a spell with Defender. It cares about a creature with Defender entering the battlefield. So it's going to work really well with that, giving you some really good card draw. Another thing that you can do to really kind of pump up the power of Arcades is run a lot of flickering effects. That's going to allow you to kind of flicker stuff really cheaply, get some really cheap card draw, keep your hand full to make sure that you can win the game and show off some really cool walls, swinging in for some combat damage. And last but not least, there's a few combat tricks that we can use that really kind of give us a one-sided advantage, giving our creatures plus 0, +5 or something like that. And there are also a few creatures that make it to where, creatures with power of toughness, X or less, they're going to be unblockable, which we'll definitely cover in the rest of the video. But for the most part, that's basically what Arcades is going to break down to. Running a lot of Defenders, you want to really amplify those enter the battlefield effects, run some sort of flickering package, and run a few combat tricks to kind of catch your opponents off guard. Now, let's take a look at some of the Defenders that we are running in Arcades. There's a lot of Defenders out there. Axebane Guardian is going to be a great mana source for you. Shield Sphere is going to cost 0. It's going to give you a really good card draw. Also kind of allows you to where if you can bounce Shield Sphere back to your hand, you can really kind of start churning through your library, especially if you get the combo online. And then also Wall of Blossoms is going to work really well with something like Panharmonicon, in addition to Arcades, giving you some really nice card draw. You can also get some really good milling action with stuff like Doorkeeper. Activation, target player puts the top X cards of the library. Let's say you have Intruder Alarm, you keep getting some Defenders, you might be able to one-shot kind of mill your opponent out. And there's also cards like Wall of Denial, Defender flying, and it has Shroud 0/8, great card. It's going to be one of your bigger beat stick creatures for the deck, and definitely have a lot of fun with the Wall of Denial swinging across. Plus, it has some really beautiful art. Look at that. I love it. On to the next, we have a few more Defenders to kind of cover, and I'm not covering all the Defenders that you can run in here. I'm just kind of highlighting, showing you the diversity of the Defenders within Magic the Gathering. So you have Jeskai Barricade, it has flashes, it can enter the battlefield, you can return another target creature you control, which is going to allow you to kind of keep that card draw going with Arcades. Same thing with Wall of Junk, whenever it blocks it, it's sitting at a 0/7, so whenever it blocks, we're going to be able to return it to our owner's hand at the end of combat for 2 mana, there'll be another card draw. And then Drift of Phantasms, you can get it down as a 0/5, it does have flying, but at the same time, it does have the Transmute ability, which will allow you to kind of search your library for something with 3 total converted mana cost. We're also running Stalwart Shield Bearers. It's going to be kind of like your Defender Tribal. Other creatures you control with Defender get +0, +2, which is going to help you start swinging in. And then fun stuff like Wall of Tears. Whenever it blocks any creatures, return those creatures to the owner's hand at the end of combat, which is going to allow you to kind of go for that tempo play, sending them back to their hand. Now, there are a lot of interactions actually in this deck. When I started preparing this deck tech, I was really surprised at how many combos there are and just really some really sweet plays that you can do. I'm going to cover a few of them right now. This is not all the plays that you can do with Arcades, but you should at least be aware of some of these interactions if you're thinking about building Arcades. Let's take Mnemonic Wall and Ghostwave, for example. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you can return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So let's say it's on the battlefield. We cast Ghostwave. It's going to exile all of our creatures. They enter the battlefield at the beginning of at the end of the turn. Mnemonic Wall is still going to trigger. That's going to bring Ghostwave back. So basically, you can kind of create this loop to where you can declare some of your walls as blockers, go for Ghostwave, flicker them, get a ton of card draw, rinse and repeat. Your opponent will be so thrilled that you're going to be doing that. They cannot wait to see it. So another really cool interaction in the deck is going to be stuff like Fog Bank and the Enchantment Lure. So with enchant creature, all creatures able to block enchanted creature do so. So you take stuff like Fog Bank, for example. We put Lure onto Fog Bank. That's going to make sure that all of the creatures are going to block Fog Bank, and at the same time, it's going to prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to it. We also have the Jellyfish Defender. If we put Lure onto the Jellyfish Defender, it's going to put it and each creature's blocking on top of their libraries, and then they shuffle their library. So it's a nice little kind of Defender Cyclonic Rift. Now, this is the one that I am most excited about. Really cool. We have Wall of Kelp. So let's look at that one first as Defender. 2 mana, 2 blue activation, put a 0/1 blue plant wall creature token. Basically put a Kelp wall into play as 0/1. Now you have Axebane Guardian into play. We're going to be able to add mana or exit the number of creatures we control with Defender. Let's say we have Intruder Alarm on the battlefield. So we tap Axebane Guardian, add 3 mana to our mana pool. We tap Wall of Kelp, get that Kelp token on the battlefield. That's going to untap all of our creatures. Long story short, it's going to give you just infinite untap steps unless your opponent can disrupt it, and that's up to you what you want to do. It's going to be infinite card draw, infinite mana, infinite creatures, and if you want to go for Laboratory Maniac, whatever that is, or you're going to draw into Crater Hoof to really kind of set the tone, whatever that is, but here it is, Intruder Alarm actually works out really well in the deck. Now, keeping online with kind of the combos within the deck, we're also running Allurin and Cloudstone Curio. These work really well. With Allurin, any player may cast creature cards with converted mana cost 3 or less without paying their mana cost. Get down Cloudstone Curio. Basically, it's going to allow you to kind of draw into your deck. Once again, whatever you need to do to draw into your deck to win, go for it, but you can definitely kind of set up this sort of synergy within the deck. Like I mentioned earlier, let's go and take a look at some of the ways that we can really kind of abuse that enter the battlefield trigger. Stuff like Aura Shards and Panharmonicon is just great in a deck like this. In fact, if you're thinking about running this in here, you definitely want to kind of throw in a few extra cards, stuff like Reclamation Sage or Snapcaster Mage, to really take advantage of these extra enter the battlefield triggers. Now, outside of abusing the enter the battlefield triggers, you definitely want to run some sort of flickering package. There's a lot of options out there. I'm not going to cover all of them. Just wanted to highlight a few of them. Eerie Interlude, I already covered Ghostway. It's kind of a redundant card on that one, but exile any number of target creature cards you control, then return those to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. That's going to give you a ton of card draw. Ghostly Flicker is going to allow you to protect some of your artifacts, or simply just go for some good card draw, and then Momentary Blink is going to allow you to get a little bit of extra value using that flashback out of the graveyard. Now, Venser. Wonderful card for the deck. Get that +2 ability. You can exile target permanent you control, but that -1 ability. Creatures are unblockable this turn, so you can use Venser to kind of start bouncing some of your walls, get that good card draw going, then use that -1 ability to make sure all your creatures are unblockable, swing it with a bunch of walls, and win the game. So Venser is definitely an auto-include in the deck if you can afford it. I'm not actually sure how much it is, but definitely want to throw that into your deck because of that -1 ability. And then stuff like Conjurer's Closet. It's going to give you that good repeated enter the battlefield trigger at the end of your turn. Now let's move on to some of the ways that we can really kind of surprise our opponent in combat with some really good value. Stuff like Oathsworn Giant, it's going to give all of our creatures vigilance and +0/+2. It is a little expensive at 6 mana, but hey, is what it is. It has a very nice effect. Now, Tetsuko. Creatures you control with power or toughness 1 or less can't be blocked. You get this down for really cheap. It's going to allow you to start swinging with a lot of your defenders. Hopefully, if you can keep it on the battlefield and protect it, it'll allow you to close the game out. And then stuff like Sadar. Creatures your opponents control without flying or reach can't block creatures with power 2 or less. Basically, going to allow you to just turn them sideways and then start swinging in. Some other really good combat spells that we do have that kind of work within some of our walls. We have Mizium Skin. It's a great way to protect a lot of your wall creatures, and at the same time giving them just a really small buff, +0/+1. That might be enough to kind of close the game out, but it does double as a way to kind of protect your creatures. Tower Defense is going to give that +0/+5, and then Bar the Door is going to give that nice +0/+4. Now, since this deck is so dependent upon Arcades being on the battlefield, you definitely want to run a little bit of a backup plan in here to make sure that you can still swing in with your creatures with Defender. We're going to run stuff like Assault Formation and Rolling Stones. It's going to make sure your walls can swing in if they want to attack, and then Assault Formation is going to make sure they can assign that toughness to they can assign that combat damage equal to the toughness rather than their power. And then also something like Meek Stone. Let's say something does happen to Arcades, you get down Meek Stone. Hopefully you can keep your opponents tapped down until you can build up that mana to recast Arcades. Since we are building this kind of thriving board state with a bunch of defenders and a bunch of walls, you definitely want to have some way to kind of protect that board state because it's going to be so important to Arcades and the deck. So you're definitely going to run stuff like Heroic Intervention, Teferi's Protection, Simic Charm. It's going to make sure that your board state is protected in the event of a board wipe because it's going to be really hard to bounce back from a board wipe. Now, speaking of board wipes, one of the fun things about building this deck is you get to run a lot of one-sided board wipes. You've got stuff like Fell the Mighty, destroy all creatures with power greater than target creature's power. So you can target one of your walls, take care of that one Dusk, and then the Dawn on the back end is going to be able to bring all of your creatures back to your hand to recast them. Same thing with Wave of Reckoning. You basically have 0 power across the whole deck, so it's a one-sided board wipe. And then same thing with Slaughter the Strong and Retribution of the Meek. It's always nice to be able to run a one-sided board wipe, especially in a deck like this that allows you to swing in and really kind of clean up that combat step. Some other really good utility creatures that you may want to think about including into your deck are going to be cards like this. We have Brago. It deals combat damage to a player. Exile any number of target non-land permanents you control, then return those to the battlefield. So you get some really good value off those creatures entering. Karametra, we're going to be casting a lot of creatures, low converted mana cost creatures. We can get down Karametra and just kind of really piggyback on those landfall triggers. And then something like Bramble Sovereign, paying that 2 mana to make a copy of it. And you're not going to be able, unfortunately, not going to be able to flicker those token copies, but it's going to allow you to get into a little bit extra card draw, which is always very, very nice. And then running simple stuff like Cathar's Crusade, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, like I said, we're running flicker effects, so you may end up putting a lot of +1 counters on a lot of your creatures, and actually earn. This is a really cool card. Whenever a creature with toughness 4 or greater is put into your graveyard from play, you remove it from the game. Then at the end of the turn, if there are 3 or more cards that have been removed, basically sacrifice it, return those creatures to play under their owner's control. So it's kind of basically like a 3 mana, protect my board state, and if something happens to it, you get to put them back onto the battlefield. Now that will be it for the Commander breakdown of Arcades. I cannot wait to build Arcades. In fact, it may be the first commander that I put on my channel once M19 releases. There's a lot of combos in here that you can go for. I didn't cover all of them, but I just wanted to highlight a few of them. And it just seems like a really, really fun deck to pilot, and I can't wait to build it. Now, if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.